In this video, we'll create a Gantt chart using the same data set that we did for the pictograph. So again, this is the data set on the Ottoman governors and sociopolitical network in Constantine, Algeria, as well as information about the governors of Algiers and Damascus, Syria, as well as Cairo, Egypt. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look again at our variables and identify the variables that we'll need for this type of chart. So just as a reminder, Gantt charts are often used in project management to track tasks and how much time they take, especially when compared to how much time they were assigned at the outset of the project. In this case, we're going to use it in a slightly different way. We're going to use it to visualize historic data. So we need to make sure that we have start date, end date. For whatever you're going to be visualizing, you'll need these endpoints. You'll also need to identify a categorical variable that you want to visualize across time. In this case, we'll take a look at the fate of these governors. And then we also need to, as you see in the slide, we also need this thing called tenure interval. Now I have it here because I've already created it, but you don't have it in your data set yet. So I'm going to walk you through how to create a calculated field next. So to do this, we'll want to first go to analysis. And this gives us a lot of options. You can see we can calculate percentages and showing row versus column totals. And then down here towards the bottom, you'll see create calculated field. Go ahead and click that option. Then we simply need to start with a name for that calculation. So I already have tenure interval because I've created it before. So I'm just going to add a number here to distinguish the two. Once you've added a name for your calculated field, then just click on the box right below that title so that your cursor appears there. And to create the interval formula, we'll need to use our starting and ending dates. So we'll use end date and note. I start with a square bracket to indicate a variable. And then as I start typing, Tableau begins to autofill the options that are available in our data set. So in this case, we're going to use end date. You can just simply click on it when it appears as you start typing. And then minus, so this is the dash button. Again, we'll start with a square bracket and begin to type our next variable, which is start date. Again, we want the one that has the little calendar icon next to it, just as we did for end date, because that gives us the month, day, and year. And note down here, it says the calculation is valid. It will tell you if it's not. For example, if I didn't close this bracket or didn't complete typing the variable name, it will say that it contains an error, and you can click on that and it will tell you what the error is. So it tries to help you out to create calculations that will actually be valid and work. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply, and note that that brings it down into our measure values. Here at the bottom of our tables list, the measures appear in green. And so it will also show that this is a calculated field by adding an equal sign in front of the pound symbol or the number sign there. So now we can begin to set up our chart. So I'm going to select start date from tables, the one with the calendar icon next to it. And I'm going to drag that over to columns. Remember that columns are your x-axis, so we'll divide your graph vertically, whatever variable you put there. When we're visualizing anything with time, generally time is going to appear along the x-axis because it's an independent variable. Then we'll take our fate variable from tables. Oops. And drag that over to rows and release it. So now we can begin to see there are some years up here, Here are some of the fates. The next thing that we'll need to do is take that calculated field that we just created, 10-year interval, and we're going to drag it to size. The other thing I have listed on this slide here is I'm going to go ahead and remove the null variables. So if you're on the desktop version, you can right click or two-finger click if you're on a Mac and select exclude. If you're working on Tableau Public, simply click on null or mouse over it and that option will appear. Same thing with the start date. We're not interested in anyone whose tenure we don't know. So we'll go ahead and exclude those null values. And because I'm familiar with the data set, I know that the year 1567 is the first date of installing an Ottoman governor in Constantine, Algeria. So it looks like we'll just be looking at the governors of Constantine. So now that we have added our 10-year interval to size, we notice that our little boxes over here indicating fate and when the governor started, the size of those boxes has changed, but it still doesn't look like a Gantt chart yet. So the next key thing that we need to do in this chart, let me minimize my data so you can see this a little more clearly. Move my legend down here, is go to the drop-down arrow on the start date variable in columns and click it. Once you've clicked that drop-down arrow, you'll notice a bunch of different options here. In this case, we want to go by day, and we want it to be this second value here. So the top set of year, quarter, month, day, these are dimensions and will be treated as categorical variables. But down here, these year, quarter, month, day, these are treated as measures. That's actually what we want in this case, and we want our day to be in this format. So 8th May 2015 is the example, rather than just a single numerical value like this. If we were going to deal with dates as dimensions, this would just give us, data that appeared on the 8th day of every month in our data set, which is not how we want to work with it with these dates. So again, remember to click the second day format here. Again, this is a measure. And we know it's a measure because it transforms the color of the little pill of our variable up here to green. And also note that now we've got an expanse between start and end dates. So here's where we're at so far. You can see a larger version of the chart here on the left in the slides. Note that the blue dimension of the start date has been replaced by the green measure. We just talked about that. So we can now, just as we did with the pictograph, we can add one more dimension to this chart by adding a little bit more data. Now we could leave it as it is and export it or embed it as an interactive chart. Or we could, like I said, we could add a little more information. So if we wanted to add another categorical variable to this information, say the governor's ethnicity, we want to explore, how did ethnicities of the governors and their fates change over time, and are there some patterns? Perhaps can we form some hypotheses about correlations between ethnicity and fate? These are the kinds of questions we could explore by adding ethnicity to our chart. So go ahead and grab ethnicity from the tables and drag it over to color and release it. So now we see our color legend appear, which tells us the ethnicity and which color it has been assigned. So in this case, Ottoman is this kind of dark gray color, Kululu is this light gray, Europeans are orange, Algerian are dark blue, and unknown light blue. So you can, again, alter the color of the various ethnicity labels by selecting, again, the color card, go to edit colors, and then just choose the variable that you want to change, and then just select a different color here. Again, I'm using the colorblind palette. You can use other palettes and then just do some color blindness accessibility testing with them. The biggest thing is I want to make sure that we can distinguish between these different categories here. So, and I want Kululus to be slightly more visible than the unknowns. The unknowns will be in this light gray. So I can click OK. And you'll notice that our colors have changed here in our legend. Again, I'm going to move the legend down to the bottom so that we can see this a little more clearly. And now we've got our start date along the bottom. And this will look bigger on your sheet as it shows here on the left in the slide. You'll be able to see this more clearly because you'll be working with your whole screen. Then the last thing that we could do if we wanted is we could change our axis labels, and we should certainly add a sheet title. So governors of Constantine, Algeria by fate and ethnicity over time. So choose a title that is descriptive so that your viewer will know exactly what they're looking at. So to change the axis label, again, you can double click this or you can right click it to bring up this pop-up, and then notice that you can change how the range of, in this case, the dates appear along the x-axis. We don't necessarily need it to show times because we don't know the exact time of the inauguration. Sometimes we don't even know the exact day, but we generally know the year. So the axis title, I'm going to relabel this as either tenure dates, as shown here in the slide. You can give it another title if you think of something else that will communicate what these dates are here on the x-axis. So again, this auto updates. So as soon as you type this in, it has changed your axis label. So you can go ahead and click the X and it will appear here. And I've already moved my ethnicity legend just so that you could see the actual chart a little more clearly. So again, we can adjust how our chart fits in the available window in the worksheet. Right now, mine is standard, but you could have it fit height or entire view. I like to, again, increase it to the largest size possible because I can always adjust it if I need to embed it into a paper, an article, a presentation. I can rearrange the size of it later. But this allows me to see the detail more clearly by expanding it out. Again, you can also update the font size, especially before you go to present or share your work. You'll probably want to do that and increase that font size a little bit. Now, if you want to do that, you can go to Format and then go to Title and Caption. Let's see. Oh, I always mess this up. Go to Font. There we go. And select Rows. And then you'll actually change where it says Header. I know that isn't entirely intuitive, but that, because we're on the Rows tab, that will change how large each of these categories appears here in the rows. You can also increase the size of our dates by going to columns and do the same thing. So I'm increasing mine to font size 11. That seems to work fairly well. It's within the range that is generally visible and legible for most people. But again, for accessibility, try and increase it as large as you can without disrupting the reading of the graph. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize my data pane so you can see this in a little bit more detail here. And here is our final chart. We've got a title, we've updated the axis label, our text is now larger, more visible. We've updated our colors. We're using a colorblind palette, so this should be as accessible as we can get it. The last step is when you embed it in a website to make sure you add some alt text that describes what's in the chart so that someone who can't see that chart or can't see it clearly understands what you're communicating in that visualization. So our next set of tutorials will go over maps, and then the final one will talk about how to add custom shapes. So please join me in those videos.